Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this past week we had a bunch of different iOS releases, satellite connectivity, and more. We also will talk about when to expect the next version of iOS. Also, we have a bunch of different deals this week thanks to Thanksgiving and Black Friday in the United States, so a bunch of different things to talk about there, as well as new things coming out about iPhone 15 and what to expect. This is your news update for the week of November 21st, 2022. Now, this past week, Phil Schiller, who's been long at Apple in charge of the App Store and Apple events, apparently has left Twitter over the recent events there. He had over 200,000 followers, and unfortunately, we won't be able to follow him there and get all of the recent information about updates and more. He often would post about different events and things like that. So looks like he's left. Maybe more people will, I'm not sure, but at this point, Phil Schiller's left Twitter. A while ago, Microsoft removed SwiftKey from the App Store for iPhone, but now it's back. So if we go into the App Store, you'll see it reloaded there, but if we go into SwiftKey, you can see that it's actually back on the App Store. So if you want to use that keyboard instead of using Apple's default keyboard or Google's Gboard, it's now available, and they brought it back due to customer feedback. They're also saying to expect some new features soon. So if you want to use it, it's back and finally available again for those that have been asking. This past week, Qualcomm held an event showing off its latest Snapdragon 8 chips, and while they're still pretty fast, they don't quite match the latest A16 Bionic in the 14 Pro and Pro Max. According to Deal and Tech, the new Snapdragon 8 chip scored a 1,483 in single-core, 4,709 in multi-core. If we take a look at what this phone scores, the 14 Pro Max, we'll just go directly in. The last time I actually ran Geekbench, you can see that it's significantly higher than the new Snapdragon 8 chipset. So 1483 compared to 1878 and 4709 compared to 5398. So they still have a little bit of catching up to do, although benchmarks don't tell the whole story, so it still could perform quite well. Now, if you have a cracked display on your iPhone 14, any of the iPhone 14 models, up until this point or this past week, you would actually have to get a replacement for your device. If you brought it into the Apple Store, they weren't able to fix it on site, but now they are. So they can replace the battery, they can replace a cracked screen now in store, as apparently some of the parts are now available. So that should be a little bit easier, and they can do it in the same day. So if you are having an issue, maybe you dropped your latest iPhone, cracked the display, you should be able to get it repaired pretty quickly this time around. Now, last week I mentioned how there's a lawsuit against Apple for them sending out data that they say they don't typically collect. Apple's been really big on privacy, and then this week a Twitter user, Misk, found that Apple collects data in a file called a DSID file, or Directory Services Identifier file, on iPhone. It says how the device is used, its performance, features, and more, and it's directly linked to a specific user and includes the username, date of birth, email, and information stored on iCloud. Now, Apple is known for not really divulging this information, collecting this information, and keeping everything private. So whether or not this ever leaves the phone is hard to say, but it is collected in a file on the device, and hopefully Apple will give some sort of response as to what these files are for and that lawsuit as well. But if they're actually violating the privacy they say they don't collect, that would be quite a bit of a shame, as that's something that many of us using iPhones value. So hopefully we'll hear more about this from Apple. I always wait to see what they have to say, as it's only one-sided at this point. But let me know what you think about that in the comments below. There's a lot more news to talk about, but before we talk about that, I wanted to mention some deals since they're vast this week due to Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving in the United States, and then Cyber Monday the following Monday. So this coming Friday, we have a bunch of different deals, but many of those deals are live now. And Apple has some discounts on their website. You'll see they give the dates here starting Friday going into Monday, where you'll get different gift cards. I've mentioned that before, but there's some significant deals right now. For example, sold directly from Apple on Amazon.com, AirPods Pro 2 are down to $199. iPad Pro 12.9 inch, the brand new M1 version that I have here, this is $100 off. Even the Apple Watch Ultra gets a discount on their website there on Amazon, down to $739 from $799. Also, I've had many friends tell me they're looking at deals at different carriers such as T-Mobile where they'll give up to $1,000 trade-in towards the new phone. So a lot of different deals. I'll link those in the description, but be sure to check around at your carriers and other things before you run out and buy a phone, as there's a lot of different deals going on this week. Apple's been working on diversifying its supply chain, and there's a new TSMC chipset plant in Arizona. Taiwan Semiconductor typically makes all of the Apple silicon chips, and they've built a new plant in Arizona, and there's plans to build another I mentioned last week. Apparently, they're working on 3nm chipsets for the M2 Pro and M2 Max right now, and the Arizona site apparently will be ready to go within the next year or two, manufacturing for Apple. So we should see that shift pretty soon, about a year or two away, but they had to build a gigantic factory, and those who have seen it have actually said it's enormous. So they're planning to build a lot of different chips there, in Arizona at least. A new report from The Information says that Apple is not planning to bring more and more ads to iPhone as they're happy with the current revenue. I talked about before in the App Store where they were bringing more and more ads into the App Store and also had plans to integrate it throughout the OS. But apparently quite a few people are unhappy with that, including myself, and even Bloomburg is saying that they're planning to bring more, but others are saying that they're not. I personally think it's hurtful to have ads on a $1,000 phone. Samsung did this for a while and has cut back some of that. Sometimes if you sign into a Samsung account on an S22 Ultra, you'll see them. Otherwise, you won't. But all of these things on an expensive phone is a little bit frustrating to the user, and I really hope Apple doesn't do that. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. Now, if you didn't watch this past week's app update video, this week they introduced iCloud.com's new design. Previously, this design was at beta.apple.com, and you can see it now. If I refresh the site, you'll see here that it's animated, and once you sign in, it's all new. It was a bit dated for a while, and once you're logged in, it has an all-new design where you can rearrange the tiles, add apps, put a custom email domain, and much more. So it's really much nicer than it was before, and maybe some of these designs will make their way to iOS 17. We'll have to wait and see. But you can customize the homepage as well, add different things such as hide my email, custom domains, numbers, pages, and more. Now, last week we had the release of iOS 16.2 Beta 3, along with the first rapid security response update. If we go into Settings, go to General, then About, and within About, you can see we have iOS 16.2, that's Beta 3, and we also have the first rapid security response. There's not a whole lot in here, as this is a test of something that's going to be rolling out regularly without having to install huge updates. That's something Apple promised with iOS 16. We're going to see that more and more in the future. So instead of having a 16.2.1, we could have 16.2 with a security response update, bringing it up to date, and then Apple can focus more time on features to get things right. We also had the release of Emergency SOS via satellite last week. That was great. I had a separate video about that. It's available on the iPhone 14s in the USA and Canada. However, some people are saying they're not seeing it. So if we go into our settings and you go down to Emergency SOS, scroll to the bottom, you should see a little way to try a demo. If you have this enabled, it just showed up. So some people were asking me, how did I get it? It just showed up for me and it's on here. So if you were wondering where it's at, it should just show there. If not, try rebooting your phone and see if it shows up. But either way, if you're in the USA or Canada and you're set to those regions, it should show up as well. Now, of course, now many people are asking me, when is iOS 16.2 releasing to the public? And also, will we see a beta 4? Typically, Apple waits a couple weeks due to the Thanksgiving holiday. So what I mean by that is last year we had iOS 15.2 beta 3 on November 16th, and then we had iOS 15.2 beta 4 on December 2nd. They waited a couple weeks between. I would expect the same sort of thing. So maybe we'll see no update this week, beta 4 the following week, and then maybe the release candidate of iOS 16.2 RC or iOS 16.2 release candidate, and then the final release around the 13th. That's what we had last year with the 13th. It could be the 12th, as they typically like to release the public versions on a Monday. So probably the week of the 11th, we'll see it on the 12th, Monday the 12th, and it'll be out to everyone. And then we won't have iOS 16.3 typically until sometime in January. They usually take a break for Christmas and the holidays, and that's what I would expect this year. So for those of you wondering, 16.2 should be just a few weeks away, and then 16.3 will be after that in a couple months. Now, this week, Tuan Rui on Twitter shared an unreleased MagSafe charger called the Apple Magic Charger. It looks like a miniature Mac Mini with a MagSafe in the middle. And so that's just something we haven't seen. Whether or not it would ever release, it looks like it's more of a prototype, but it's just something that's a little bit different that Apple was apparently considering. Now, iPhone 15 is quite a ways away, but Apple is always getting them ready for the next launch. They have to get everything ready in the factories and more, and we're hearing more and more about them from the supply chain. Apparently, iPhone 15 Pro models will gain the much faster USB 3.2 or Thunderbolt 3 port. So that would be great to have Thunderbolt to transfer ProRes or ProRAW files right off the phone in incredible speed. That would be a huge advantage to be able to use your iPhone with the best quality possible and then be able to quickly go and edit that footage on a Mac. So that's something I definitely would welcome. However, the less expensive models apparently will stick to USB 2.0 speeds. That's a bit of a disappointment, as you would think they could push that kind of data over USB or even Lightning, but they just never did. So it looks like only the Pro models might get the faster speed at this point. According to a new post on Twitter by Shrimp Apple Pro, the iPhone 15 Ultra or high-end Pro models will feature titanium. We've heard this over and over, so we definitely could see stainless steel, but then the inclusion of maybe an Ultra with titanium like the Apple Watch Ultra. I would love to see that. It would make it lighter and also a little bit more durable than it already is, and it would have new rounded edges more like the iPhones that you see in this photo or phones you see in the photos or the iPhone 5C where it's rounded over the back but also squared off on the sides. So that would be a great change, something a little bit different that combines the comfort of the curved edges but also sort of the gripability of the squared off edges. India is the latest to join in on trying to pass a law forcing Apple to adopt USB-C. However, at this point, it seems it's a little bit late and it's going to happen either way. But they're the next to do it. iPhones in the US will probably get that, and the US government has been trying to think of pushing that as well. So at this point, it looks like it's going to go that way either way. I don't necessarily like to see legislation push someone to put a certain port on their phone, as it sort of stops innovation in the future, but it looks like if they do put a port on those phones, it's going to be USB-C anyway. iPhone 15 Pro models are also expected to get a bump in RAM, increasing to 8 gigabytes from 6 gigabytes we've had for the past couple of years. If we go back into Geekbench here, you can see if we go to the main page, we have 5.49 gigabytes, and that's just under 6. So we have 6 gigabytes of RAM. 8 gigabytes is welcome, although maybe we'll gain features such as 8K, things like that would require a little bit more RAM to process things in the background. There's not a definite on this, but it makes sense to bump it up to 8 gigabytes if they're going to be using maybe even M2 chips in them or M3 chips. Also, we expect the buttons to sort of become virtual buttons, like I mentioned before, similar to what we have on the iPhone 7 and 8, where you press it, it doesn't physically move, but it provides haptic feedback, feeling like you pressed it. That would reduce the overall wear of devices, make them more weather resistant or water resistant, and seal them up, whether that's the power sleep wake button or the volume buttons. I hope they don't get rid of the silent switch though. Also, many people are still thinking the high-end version will be called Ultra, so we'll have to wait and see what Apple does with that. Now, quite a few rumors this past year have said that we should expect iPads in the near future to have OLED displays. These rumors have come and gone, and I'm a bit skeptical of them just because we have mini LED, and the next big step is micro LED, which they're backlit. You can have even better control of the overall backlight, and they seem to be more color accurate over time than OLED displays. So we'll see if they maybe push OLEDs to some displays, or maybe they go to micro LED, or maybe that's just not ready yet for the smaller displays. We're starting to see that on some televisions, but right now it's a bit expensive. So we'll have to wait and see. Apple is going to move to this probably at some point, as they did with their iPhones, but maybe this year in 2023 or even 2024. A recently discovered patent by Patently Apple shows that Apple is experimenting still with keyboards that are virtual, similar to what we have on the iPhone, but on the Mac. So instead of having this keyboard here, we can have a full touch display with haptic feedback. Some say it would have raised keys, others say it would just be flat, and then they could completely change it to different controls based on what you're doing on the display. display. Apple's constantly trying to innovate and change things, or at least try things, and whether or not they release them to the public is hard to say. But they at least patented that, and I thought that was kind of a different sort of concept. We've heard of some of that in the past, but we've never actually seen it released to the public. And so that's everything for this week's news. I'm anxious to see the redesign of the iPhone 15 and also iOS 16 updates. Hopefully we'll get some even more features dealing with the always-on display and more. I would like to see customization where I could move the clock maybe to the center, make it bigger, or something like that. But hopefully we'll see some changes with that in future iOS updates. Let me know what you're looking most forward to in the comments below, and be sure to check out those deals if you're looking for AirPods Pro. That's probably the best one listed, but I'll list a bunch in the description. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.